Welcome to class number 255. And in this class, we shall look at how to use formulas inside our data validation rules. But of course, first, we need to understand what is data validation. In simple terms, Excel data validation, it's a feature that we use to restrict or validate user input. Of course, you can create a validation rule that controls what kind of data can be entered into a certain range or a single cell inside your workbook. That's the work of Excel data validation. Okay, I'm going to be switching over to a workbook that I have shared with everyone. Please feel free to grab your own copy of the file that we're going to be using in this class. Check the description of this video so that you can grab the copy. I'll just exit this particular presentation and head over to Excel. So this is the file that I shared with you a few minutes back, and we shall be reworking some of these examples together. Okay, now we're going to be starting with this particular example here. Of course, in our recent classes that we have had, I've taken through some of the basic applications of data validation. Okay, so let me just head over to the data tab under the data validation right here, and I open this dialog box so that I can recap on a few things that we have handled together. In our recent classes, we have looked at the validation criteria, where we introduced ourselves to how do we restrict whole numbers, how do we work with decimals, how do we do a data validation list, which is one of the common uses of this particular tool by most of us here. We also demonstrated how to use the dates, how to restrict date entries, time entries. We also demonstrated how to use the text length. So whatever we were doing from these options here, whole number, decimal list, date, time, length, we were doing inbuilt commands that are used for data validation. Now today, our focus is going to be switching over to the custom option, because the custom option requires that you give it a formula that you write yourself, and then it will use that particular formula to evaluate whether to allow an entry or to deny that entry. So that will be our focus today. And we're going to be starting off with an example here. You see, what we have here is a simple form that we are using to collect data. And what we need is the department. You give us the project start date, you give us the company code, the project number, and the project description. These are the only 5 columns that we have where we are collecting data. Okay, now the task here is very simple. They want us to make sure that the project numbers that we punch into this particular column here, the first 2 digits are non-numeric, followed by any other 4 characters. That is the requirement. So anything that should be punched here should follow that criteria. Maybe I can punch in BJ 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. When I hit enter key on the keyboard, you can see this one accepts. But when I start with, for example, 25 BJK1, I am denied. Why? I'm denied simply because the criteria here dictates that the first 2 digits must be non-numeric, or the first 2 characters have to be non-numeric. Okay, so how do we do this? Let's head over to this particular worksheet here and try to handle this question step by step. Okay, so I've broken this particular formula down here into segments so that we can understand it properly. The first one is to make sure that the text length that is punched into the project code is greater than or equals to 6 characters, because the rule here says the first 2 digits are non-numeric, followed by any other 4 characters. So let us test that. Now let me just punch in here something. I'll say BJ 1, 2, 3, 4R. That is the product number. When I hit enter key, of course, this one will not deny because there is no criteria, there is no validation. But let us test this, because we want to use formulas to achieve this data validation restriction. I can come in here and say equals len, and then I'll give this text here and close brackets. When I hit enter key, of course, this one tells me that these are seven characters. I can actually come in here at the end and ask a question, a simple logical question. are you greater than or equals to 6, so that I can convert this one back into a Boolean data type of true or false. When I hit enter key on the keyboard, I get a true. That is the first check that I need to implement. I think I'll eliminate this one here, and I'll also eliminate this one here. And then we ask this question here. Are the first 2 characters non-numeric? That is the question. How do we ask that? Of course, we need to make sure that we trim out only the first 2 characters to find out if they are non-numeric or if they are numeric. I'll come in here and say equals. I use the left function. Remember our text functions that we covered. I'll use the left function and then point over to this particular text, comma, and the number of characters that I need extracted are 2, and I will close off the brackets from here. And I get this result here. Now I need to ask, is this one that is being delivered here a number or is it text? We can use the isNumber function to ask that question. To come in here, and at the beginning, what has been delivered by the left, I'll ask isNumber. Is this result that is being delivered by the left function a number? I will close parentheses from here. And when I hit enter key on the keyboard, of course, I get a false. It's not a number. But let us change here. In case it was a number, maybe I'll say 1, 2, 3, GHF, maybe a 7 at the end, and enter. Of course, you can see that this one is being interpreted as if it is a text. Now, in case there are numbers that are here and they are read as if they are text, then you can introduce the value function. So let us wrap this entire thing into the value function. Maybe I can put the value function right here, and then the isNumber will come in later. Now let us change this one to maybe text. I'll say BJH 1, 2, 3, 4 and enter. Because it's giving us a false here, yet the first 2 digits here are non-numeric. Otherwise, we would have expected to see a true here. We are not getting that. Which function can we use to convert this back into a true? Yes, there is a function that we talked about last time, the not function. So the not function, we use it to convert values of false and trues. If it was a false, the not function will convert it back into a true. If it was a true, the not function will convert it into a false. Now let us reintroduce function here. I'll say not, and then I close this particular formula from here and enter. So this one gives us a true because the first 2 characters here are non-numeric, and that's what we want. But now if I change this one to a number, maybe I say 1, 2, 3, 4, and then RJ6 and enter, you can see we now have a false here. So this particular formula should be able to work for us. Okay. Now the last step that we need to take is to make sure that we combine all of them, these 2 particular formulas that we have written, combine them, and once we achieve this combination, we can now copy it and put them into our data validation rule. Okay. Which function can we use here? Of course, the AND function. The AND function will actually combine all these logical formulas that we have written, introduce our AND function here. I'll say AND, but of course, before I do that, I need to copy these formulas that I've written. What I will do, I'll actually double click in here and copy this formula like so. Make sure that you exclude, you do not copy the equals symbol, and then I'll X out. When I come back here on my home tab, I'll open my clipboard so that I can see the values that I'm copying here. I'll double click in here, copy this gigantic formula because I don't want to repeat this particular formula. I just copy it and it will appear here. All right. Now what I can do is to come in here and say equals. I open the AND function and I will paste in my logical tests. Of course, my logical tests here have been already given up here by these formulas that we wrote. Bring in the first one, comma, and I also bring in the second one like so. And now I can close the AND function from here and hit enter key on the keyboard. Of course, this one gives us a false because you can see the first 2 characters are not non-numeric. They are exactly numeric. That's why we are getting a false. But we know that this particular formula that we have written here will be able to work inside the data validation. Now let us change this one maybe to something else. I can say KRJ1235 and enter. You see, because the first two characters here are non-numeric, that's why we are getting a true here. Now we are very much sure that this formula that we wrote here will be able to work inside our data validation. Let us take it there. So what I will do, I will make sure that I clear my clipboard. I double click in here, copy this entire gigantic formula, Control C on the keyboard, and then come into this particular range of cells and implement my data validation. I'll highlight this range on the data tab, data validation, and this will open the data validation dialog box. I'll come in here, instead of choosing the built-in commands, I'll go for a custom one, and then I'll paste that gigantic formula here, Control V, and there you go. When I say OK, the data validation rule has been applied in this particular range here. Now, if I try to punch in, let's say, I'll say KJR3346, enter, this one accepts. If I punched in here, 123 KJR3, this one will not accept. I get this particular message here. This value doesn't match the data validation restrictions that have been defined for this cell here. So that's one simple example of using a formula or the custom data validation option to restrict data entries. Let me check in the comments if we have any questions. I don't think that we have questions as of now. Let's move forward. Now, this task is quite similar to what we have done, but again, there is a small difference here in what we need to write, okay? The task is make sure that the project number is 2 fixed letters, KR, and 4 other numbers. That is the requirement. So let us try something here, like I will say KJ instead of KR, 1, 2, 3, 8. I'm trying to make this entry here. When I hit enter, of course, I'm denied because there is a data validation rule. Not until I cancel and I come here and say KR 1, 2, 4, 5, 6. Enter on the keyboard. This will not accept. Why? Because I've actually punched in more than 6 characters. Okay. I'll just cancel this one. Maybe I can try KR 3, 3, 4, 5. Enter. This one accepts because I've actually punched in the allowed number of characters, which is supposed to be 6, and I've made sure that the first 2 characters equal to KR as the text that has been defined. Now, how do we implement this? Of course, we shall need a combination of the text functions. Let us move forward and do this together. So I'll come in here and answer the first question. Of course, the first question, because we've broken this formula down, we want to write it from scratch, but we want to write it step by step. That's why we broke it into 3 parts. And then later on, we combine and get one final formula that works, that we can export or import into the data validation rule. The characters that should be punched into this project number column should equal to only 6, because we are saying the first 2 characters should be KR followed by 4 numbers, okay? But let me check if there is any data validation rule here so that I can clear it and we write it from scratch. Now I'll come here and punch in KR, then I'll say 1, 2, 3, 4. That's the one that should be allowed, okay? But let us first ask the questions here. I'll say equals. I'll use the len function like we did in the first example to count how many characters have been punched in here. When I close the brackets, of course, these ones are 6 in a number, and we want to turn this one into a logical question. Is the result being delivered by the len function greater than or equals to 6? Of course, we are supposed to ask, is it equals to 6? Okay, so I'll come at the end here, at the end of my formula, and say equals, are you equal to 6? That's how I ask that particular logical question. And when I enter, this one converts into a true. Now, if I actually added in another character here, maybe a 7, this one turns into a false, simply because the characters that we have here do not equal to 6 in total. I'll make sure that I get rid of this 7 so that we can proceed with the next question. The next question we need to ask is, the first 2 characters, are they equal to KR? How do we ask that question? Of course, I'll come in here and say equals. I'll use the left function first to make sure that I extract the first two characters. I say left, and then that text is given right here in D2. And the number of characters I'm interested in, they are only 2. And then I will close my left function from here. When I hit enter key, of course, this is what is returned. Now, the simple logical question I need to ask is, what is being returned here equals to KR? How do we ask that question? I'll double click in the formula and say, are you equal to, because I'm dealing with text, I'll open the double quotes and then punch in KR, like so. Are you equal to KR? Then when I hit enter key on the keyboard, I get a true. Now, in case these characters changed, maybe to KJ, you see, I get a false, because the question here is, are the first two characters equal to KR? Of course, what we have here is KJ. So we get a false in here. Now, the other question that we need to ask ourselves is, are the last 4 characters numbers? So I'll come in here and do that. This time I'll use the right function. So I'll go right, come in into here, and then ask the only 4 numbers here if they are equal to numbers. I can see 1, 2, 3, but of course you can see this one is aligning to the left. It's supposed to be aligning to the right. If it was a number, it's aligning to the left. This simply means that Excel is looking at it as text. What I will do is to double click in my formula and convert this one into a number. So I'll use the value function, and now I can introduce my is number. How do I introduce that is number function? I double click in the formula and come in here and say is number. Okay, I want to understand is the results that the right and the value function is delivering, are they numbers? When I hit enter, of course, this one tells me it is true that they are numbers, which might be disguising sometimes, but I can confirm that this is correct. I can add here something. Maybe I can change this one to J in the enter. You see, I get a false because the last 4 characters are not numbers. All of them are not numbers. I can see 1, 2, 3, J. Of course, when I change this one to maybe a 5, like so, you can see I get a true here, which is fantastic. Now, if I actually change this KJ to KR and enter, you can see we are getting trues all the way through here. Now, the last step that we need is to introduce or to combine all these logical functions that we have written into one and then transfer it into our data validation, which I'll come in here and do. I'll say equals and, but of course I need to use my clipboard to make sure that this copying here becomes a little bit easy for me. I don't want to repeat these formulas, but otherwise you can come in here and repeat all these formulas from scratch. But I like to, use the shortcut. That I will do is to come in here and make sure that I use my clipboard here. I launch it, and what I will do is clear all, and let us start from scratch. The first one here, I will copy it carefully. Make sure that you avoid copying the equal symbol, like so. I'll come into the next one that we wrote, Control C, and I'll also copy the last one, like so. And there you go. Now, if I want to combine them, I'll say equals and the first logical test will be, I can go with any, no specific order, comma, and this is the second logical test, comma, and this is the last logical test. Now I can close the AND function from here and hit enter key on the keyboard. Okay, this one gives us a true. So what I can do is to actually clear the clipboard, come back here, remove whatever is here, copy this formula that I've written here, or the combined one, Control C, and then highlight this range, and then I can implement my data validation. I'll go back to the data tab, data validation. Instead of picking the input, I'll go for the custom one and paste that formula here, Control V, say okay. There you go. Now let us test if our data validation rule is working and if it is actually following our conditions. Okay, I'll punch in here the project number. I'll start with KR 1, 2, 3, 4. Of course, this one should accept. This one accepts. But if I say KJL 1, 2, 3, you can see this one will not accept. It's not meeting 2 of the conditions here. The first 2 characters are not KR, and the last 4 numbers are not numbers. There's a text, there's a letter mixed up right there. So I can cancel. Maybe I can try something else. Let me do 1, 2, 3, KG1 and enter. Of course, this one will also not accept simply because you can see the first criteria has not been met. The first two characters must be equal to KR and the text length would be equal to 6 in total, and the last 4 characters must be numbers. It's not allowing here, and cancel. Let us move forward and look at another example, and this is quite similar to what we have done, but let us read through what it says here. Make sure that the company code is 1 letter and 4 numbers, and they have given us the example here. Can someone try this? I believe if it was our usual classes, someone would have shared their screen and tried, but of course this is YouTube. You may not get a chance to share your screen and try. Let me just move over to this worksheet and try this one from scratch. I'll make sure that there is no data validation rule here. I'll clear everything and say, okay. Now, how do we answer this question? Is the text length equal to 5? Of course, when we combine the first character and the 4 numbers, those one give us 5 characters in total. That's the first question we should ask. I'll say C 1, 2, 3, 4, just to use this particular value for demonstration purposes. I'll come in here and say equals len. The length of this text, is it equals to 5? That's the first question. This one tells me true. Now, the first character, text or non-numeric. Is it text or non-numeric? Of course, the condition here says that the first character should be a letter. So I'll come in here and say equals left and come in here and pick the first character. Enter. This one is returned. And the simple question that I need to ask here is to convert this into a value and check whether the character that is being delivered, is it a number? Okay. So I'll come in here and convert this into a value like we did in the previous example. Enter on the keyboard. Of course, this one gives us an error, but if we introduce the is number, let me introduce the is number function here and enter. This one gives us a false. Okay, but when we change this one to something like this, what do we get? We get a true. That true, this is a number. Of course, our interest is to make sure that we start with a letter. So I'll introduce D here, and then we get a false. Of course, to convert this false into a true, we may need the not function here. Okay, we may need the not function to convert this false into a true, because ideally, when you have this capital letter D at the beginning, you should be getting a true here. So let us reintroduce our not function here and close parenthesis, enter. This one gives us a true. Now, if I remove the D and started this one with a number like so, I get a false. Of course, that is what I need. So I reintroduce the letter D and we move forward. Now, the last question is the last 4 characters should be numbers. I will use the right function this time and ask this question. Are the last 4 characters equal to numbers? How do we ask that? Of course, the first thing is to extract the values or the characters. We have extracted them using the right function. Now we need to convert them into a number so that we can ask the question if they are equal to numbers. Now we have just converted them into numbers. Now we shall introduce our is number function to ask the question, are you a number or you're something else? Okay. Enter. This one gives us a true. Now, if we change these numbers, maybe the last character, if I changed it to K, just as an example to test things, and enter, you can see I get a false. That simply means that this particular formula, or these 3 formulas should be able to work if they are combined. Okay. I'll make sure that I change the last character to a number, like so. And there you go. You can see we have trues all the way. Now let us come in here and combine all of them. This time, let us not use our clipboard. I'll actually punch in the formula from scratch. I'll say equals, and the first logical test will be I'll use the left function. And with the left function, I'll extract the first character, like so. And I need to ask, is this first or is this? I think I need to use the len function here. That was the first argument. I'll say len, the len of this particular text string, if it is equals to 5. Okay, that is the first logical test, comma. The second logical test, we said, is the first character text or non-numeric? How did we ask that question? Of course, we said we used our left function, and this is the text that we are targeting, comma, and we only want one character. But of course, we said we needed to convert this one into a value. So I'll introduce the value function here and ask the question, is it a number? Okay. Is it a number? I can close the value and the is number from here. That's the second logical question. And the third one was very simple. Look at the last four characters. So we said we use the right function here. And then this is the text that we are targeting. The number of characters are 4. And we said we need to convert this one into a value. So I introduced the value function that will convert this text into a number. And we shall ask our question, is number. So is number will come in again here. And I can close these two functions that I've just opened, like so. And I can close the and as well and hit enter key on the keyboard. This one gives me a false. I don't know whether it's supposed to be giving me a true, but of course, since we have actually reworked this from or writing this gigantic formula in one go, that's why we might have missed a thing somewhere. Maybe I just remove everything and go back to my clipboard. Let me just go back to my clipboard and clear whatever is here. Then come in here, copy the first logical test, like so. Close out, copy the second logical test that we wrote, like so. And also copy the last one, like so. And we have our clipboard ready. I'll say equals and the first logical test will be this one here, comma. This is the second one, comma. And then I put in the third one. Close the and. I believe this method is the easiest. So when I hit enter on the keyboard, you see, I get a true. If you try to write this thing from the scratch, you might get issues missing out either an opening bracket, a closing bracket, and missing just a comma will cause problems to your formula. All right, now let us copy this particular gigantic formula and implement it here. What I will do is to highlight whatever is here and remove, and also confirm that there is no any data validation rule. I'll say clear all. And now what I can do is to copy this gigantic formula, highlight this range, data validation. Instead of you choosing from the drop-down lists here, from the available built-in commands, I'll go custom, and then I control V, and then say okay. Now the data validation is running here, but you can't see that the data validation is here. But of course, when you try punching in values, that's when you'll know that there is a data validation. Let us try to punch in something here. I will say KR. Maybe I'll say K1, 2, 3, 4. Enter. This one accepts, of course, because the first character is a letter and the last 4 digits are numbers as well. Now, if I started with a number, maybe I'll say 4KR, 1, 2. Enter. This one will not accept, okay? The value does not match the data validation restrictions that have been defined here, okay? If I started with maybe C1, 3, J, I can introduce a letter here, J4, and hit enter key on the keyboard. This will not accept. Why? Because the last 4 characters should be numbers. I'll say L255R. Enter. This one will not accept simply because there is a criteria that's not being met here. I'll cancel and say L2361. So this company code should accept when I hit enter key because the first character is a letter and the last 4 digits are numbers. That's how you can use the formulas inside our data validation rule. Let us check if we have any concerns here. Timothy Kizito is saying you are now clear. This is Kizito. I think this is the latest comment. You are now clear. Jansu Derek, you're also confirming that I am now clear on your side. All right, let's move forward. Let's move forward. We look at our next challenge here. Of course, our next challenge here is quite easy, assuming that we are working within this particular data, and the criteria is that the project start date here should be in the future. Okay, for example, today is let me check. Today is 29th. So any value that should be punched here should be dates that are greater than or equals to today's date. Is the condition. So if I punched in here, for example, 29th of March 2024, you can see this one accepts. Now, if I punch in yesterday's date, for example, yesterday was 28th of March 2024, this one will not accept simply because the criteria has not been met. Similarly, we can also implement a data validation that looks at the dates being provided being in the past. We shall turn, or we shall actually do the vice versa for that. But let us come in here and look at the formula that we need to write here. It's quite very simple. All right, so we shall introduce the today function here and see how it works. Okay, I'll come in here and say equals today. What does the today function do? You just punch it into a cell and it will return the today's date. And the shortcut is control, I think semicolon, to get today's date. Now, the simple question that we need to ask here is that date value being punched here greater than or equals to today's date? That is the question. What I can do is come in here and say equals is that date value that is punched in P2 greater than or equals to today's date. I open the today function, okay, and then hit enter key on the keyboard. This one gives me false because there is no date value here. But if I punched here, for example, 1st of January 2024, you see, I still get a false. But punch in here 29th of March 2024. This one turns out to be true. Okay. If I punched in here 28th of March 2024, this one gives me a false, meaning that this particular test is going through, and this is the simple formula that we need to implement inside our data validation rule. Now, once we get comfortable, we can actually copy this. Make sure that we remove whatever is here. We copy this formula and highlight this range where we want to implement the data validation, and come in here, go for a custom, and then paste our formula here. Say okay. Now let us try this. I'll say 29th of March 24. This one accepts. I'll say 28th of March 2024. This one will not accept because it is actually a day in the past. I will cancel until I punch in some dates that are in the future. I'll say 30th of March 2024. This one will accept. I'll punch in 1st of May 2024. This one will accept. So the data validation rule that we have implemented here only accepts date values that are in the future. And this is the simple formula that you need.